The viewing deck of Galactic Council Station 3 hummed with quiet tension as Lieutenant Kang Ji-woo stared down at the planet below. Kethavara Prime hung in space like a green and brown marble streaked with angry red clouds. It looked peaceful from orbit. Beautiful, even. But Ji-woo knew better than to trust appearances. 300 years, Commander Vexithara said behind her. The alien's voice clicked and buzzed through her translation device. 300 years and not one living soul has walked off that surface. Ji-woo turned away from the viewport. The commander stood nearly twice her height, her body covered in shining plates that looked like dark armor. 4 arms ended in claws that could punch through steel. Eyes like black diamonds watched Ji-woo with something that might have been pity. How many expeditions? Ji-woo asked. 47 confirmed. Probably more that we never tracked. Vexithara's mandibles clicked together. The hegemony sent their best warriors. The ethereal collective tried their mind readers. The tech union brought machines that could level cities. All dead within days. Other aliens filled the briefing room behind them. Ji-woo had learned their names but still struggled with their faces. Ambassador Kilmora looked like a walking tree with too many eyes. High Scholar Zanketh reminded her of a giant spider made of crystal. Captain Moridak could have been mistaken for a bear if bears had 6 legs and breathed poison gas. They all watched her with the same expression. Not quite mocking, not quite curious. More like they were looking at a bug that was about to be stepped on. The human application for council membership requires completion of the trial, Ambassador Kilmora said. Her voice sounded like wind through leaves. Every species must prove their worth before joining our civilization. Ji-woo had heard this speech before. Every member species had faced the same test. Send 1 representative to Kethavara Prime. Survive for 2 weeks. Return with proof of completing the mission. Simple rules that had claimed the lives of warriors, scholars, and heroes from across the galaxy. What kind of proof? Ji-woo asked. High Scholar Zanketh moved forward on legs that looked like glass needles. The Alpha. Every expedition that has penetrated deep enough has encountered it. Bring back something that proves you faced the planet's ultimate predator. Assuming you live that long, Captain Mordak rumbled through his breathing mask. Most don't make it past the first day. Ji-woo nodded slowly. She had studied the expedition records for months. The files made for grim reading. The hegemony's elite guard unit had landed with enough firepower to crack a moon. Their final transmission showed warriors fleeing in panic from shadows that moved wrong. The ethereal collective's mind readers had tried to understand the planet's ecosystem through telepathy. They had been found days later, alive but completely insane, babbling about thoughts that ate thoughts. What exactly makes this planet so dangerous? Ji-woo asked. Vexithara's plates rattled with what might have been laughter. Everything. The atmosphere tries to dissolve your equipment. The plants hunt like animals. The animals exist in multiple dimensions at once. And the ecosystem learns from every expedition. It gets smarter, more dangerous. The planet itself is hostile, Ambassador Kilmora added. Not just the creatures that live on it. The very ground seems to want you dead. Ji-woo walked over to the holographic display showing Kethavara Prime's surface. Thick forests covered most of the continents. Mountain ranges looked like broken teeth jutting from the landscape. Red storm systems swirled through the atmosphere with unnatural precision. Previous teams went in with full support, she said. Ships, weapons, technology. The Council allows minimal equipment only, High Scholar Zanketh replied. Basic survival gear, personal weapons, nothing that could give an unfair advantage. Ji-woo almost laughed at that. Unfair advantage. As if any advantage would be unfair when facing a planet that had killed heroes and legends without breaking a sweat. Captain Park Dong-min stepped forward from the human delegation. Her commanding officer looked uncomfortable surrounded by so many aliens, but his voice stayed steady. Lieutenant, you don't have to do this. We can withdraw the application. Find another way. There is no other way, Ambassador Kilmora said firmly. Council law is clear. Every species follows the same path to membership. Ji-woo studied the planet's image again. Somewhere down there, 47 expeditions had died trying to prove their species worthy of joining galactic civilization. Warriors with natural armor and claws, telepaths who could read minds and bend reality, machines that never tired and never felt fear, all dead. What do you think makes humans different? Vexithara asked. The question sounded genuine, not mocking. Your species has no natural weapons, no psychic abilities. Your technology is centuries behind ours. What makes you believe you can succeed where others failed? Jiwoo considered the question carefully. Humans were not the strongest species in the galaxy, not the smartest, not the most advanced. They had only recently developed faster-than-light travel. Their weapons were simple compared to alien technology. Their bodies were soft and vulnerable, but they had walked out of Africa on foot. They had crossed oceans in wooden boats. They had survived ice ages and plagues and wars that should have destroyed them. When stronger predators hunted them, humans had simply outlasted them. When smarter enemies tried to defeat them, humans had learned to be more stubborn than their opponents were clever. "We keep going," she said finally. "That's what humans do. We keep going when everything tells us to stop." The aliens exchanged glances. Jiwoo could not read their expressions, but she sensed doubt. Maybe disappointment. They had probably hoped for a more impressive answer. Some revelation about hidden human abilities or secret technologies. Instead, she had given them the simple truth. Humans were persistence hunters. They chased their prey not by being faster or stronger, but by never giving up. They ran mammoth to exhaustion across endless plains. They tracked deer for days through dense forests. When the quarry finally collapsed from exhaustion, humans were still there, still moving, still hunting. Dr. Lee Hae-jin approached with a data pad. The mission xenobiologist looked pale but determined. "I've compiled everything we know about the planet's ecosystem. It's not much, but it might help." Jiwoo took the pad and scrolled through the information. Atmospheric composition, gravity measurements, scattered reports from failed expeditions. The picture that emerged was of a world that seemed designed to kill visitors in the most creative ways possible. Atmospheric distortions disable most electronic equipment within hours, Dr. Lee explained. The electromagnetic field shifts constantly. Nothing technological lasts long down there. "Good thing humans evolved to hunt with sharpened sticks," Jiwoo said. She meant it as a joke, but the alien representatives took it seriously. They whispered among themselves in languages her translator could not handle. She caught fragments. Words like primitive and inadequate and certain death. Let them think humans were primitive. Let them believe human technology was inadequate. Jiwoo had studied the expedition records more carefully than anyone realized. The advanced species had failed because they relied on their advantages. The hegemony had trusted their superior firepower. The ethereals had depended on their psychic gifts. The tech union had believed their machines were invincible. When those advantages were taken away, they had nothing left. Humans had never had those advantages to begin with. They had learned to survive with determination, adaptability, and sheer stubborn refusal to quit. Those were not advantages that could be disabled by atmospheric distortion or countered by hostile ecosystems. "The shuttle is prepared," Captain Mordak announced. "Departure in 1 hour." Jiwoo nodded and turned back to the viewport. Kethavara Prime waited below, beautiful and deadly. 47 expeditions had gone down to that surface. None had returned. She would be number 48. The aliens began filing out of the briefing room, probably to place bets on how long she would survive. Jiwoo had heard the whispered conversations. The optimists gave her 6 hours. The pessimists wondered if she would last long enough to send a final transmission. Captain Park approached as the room emptied. "Jiwoo, are you sure about this?" She looked at her commanding officer. Park had trained her, promoted her, trusted her with impossible missions before, but this was different. This was not just about completing an objective or gathering intelligence. This was about proving that humanity deserved a place among the stars. "I'm sure," she said. "This is what we do, sir. We go places others can't. We survive things others won't. We keep going when everyone else stops." Park nodded slowly. He understood. Every human understood, even if they could not put it into words. It was bred into their bones, written in their DNA, carved into their souls by millions of years of persistence hunting across the African plains. They were the species that chased mammoth until the mammoth collapsed. Now Jiwoo would chase something else, something that had killed heroes and legends and warriors from across the galaxy. She would keep going until either she collapsed or it did. The planet turned below them, patient and deadly, waiting for expedition number 48. The shuttle shuddered as it hit Kethavara Prime's upper atmosphere. Jiwoo gripped her safety harness as the small craft bucked and rolled like a wild horse trying to throw its rider. Warning lights flashed across the control panel in angry red patterns. Atmospheric distortion increasing, the shuttle's computer announced in its calm mechanical voice. Electronic systems experiencing interference. Through the viewport, Jiwoo watched the planet's surface rush up to meet her. The green forest she had seen from orbit looked different now. Darker. The trees seemed to twist and writhe as if they were in pain. Red lightning crackled between the clouds with unnatural precision. The shuttle's engines sputtered and died. Landing system offline, the computer said. Its voice crackled with static. Emergency protocols engaged. Brace for impact. Jiwoo closed her eyes and focused on her breathing. In through the nose. Out through the mouth. Steady and calm. This was just another challenge. Another obstacle to overcome. She had survived worse things than a rough landing. The shuttle hit the ground hard enough to rattle her teeth. Metal groaned and sparked around her. The smell of burning electronics filled the cabin. When the craft finally stopped moving, Jiwoo opened her eyes to find herself hanging upside down in her harness. She released the buckle and dropped to what used to be the ceiling. Her equipment pack had spilled across the cramped space, but everything seemed intact. Basic survival gear, a simple projectile rifle, enough rations for 2 weeks, not much to face a planet that had killed heroes and legends. The shuttle's door refused to open at first. Jiwoo had to kick it 3 times before the bent metal finally gave way. She crawled out into alien sunlight and stood up slowly, checking herself for injuries. A few bruises. Nothing serious. The clearing where she had crashed looked normal enough at first glance. Grass covered the ground in shades of green and blue. Trees with smooth bark surrounded the open space like silent watchers. The air smelled of flowers and growing things, but something felt wrong. Jiwoo could not put her finger on it at first. Then she realized what bothered her. The shadows were moving independently of their sources. A tree branch would sway left while its shadow moved right. Grass would bend in one direction, while the dark patches beneath it flowed the opposite way. She gathered her scattered equipment and checked her instruments. The compass spun wildly, unable to find magnetic north. The electronic map showed nothing but static. Even her basic radio produced only empty hiss when she tried to contact the orbital station. So much for staying in touch, she muttered. Jiwoo shouldered her pack and started walking toward the forest edge. The expedition files had mentioned that crashed shuttles disappeared within hours of landing. The planet's ecosystem somehow absorbed or recycled anything made of metal or advanced materials. Better to put some distance between herself and the wreckage before whatever lived here decided to investigate. The trees loomed overhead as she entered the forest proper. Their bark felt warm to the touch, almost like living skin. Leaves rustled in patterns that had nothing to do with the wind. Every few steps she caught glimpses of movement in her peripheral vision, but when she turned to look, nothing was there. After an hour of walking, Jiwoo stopped for water. The expedition files had warned about the planet's predators, but so far she had seen nothing more threatening than strange shadows and moving leaves. Maybe the previous teams had been unlucky. Maybe they had panicked too quickly. That was when she noticed the silence. No birds sang in the trees. No insects buzzed through the air. No small animals rustled through the underbrush. The entire forest held its breath as if waiting for something to happen. Jiwoo set down her water bottle and reached for her rifle. She did not see the attack coming. One moment she was alone in a quiet forest. The next, dark shapes erupted from the ground around her like smoke given form. They moved wrong. Not like animals or even like the strangest aliens she had encountered. They flowed from solid matter into empty air and back again. Sometimes she could see through them. Sometimes they looked solid as stone. Always they circled her with predatory intelligence. Umbrals. The files had mentioned them briefly. Dimensional predators that existed partially in this reality and partially in another. They had wiped out the hegemony's elite guard unit in less than 6 hours. The largest umbral solidified directly in front of her. It stood as tall as a human, but its proportions were wrong. Too many joints in the arms, eyes that reflected light like mirrors, claws that seemed to cut through space itself as it moved. Jiwoo raised her rifle and fired. The projectile passed harmlessly through the creature's torso. As it phased into its alternate dimension, the umbral made a sound like breaking glass mixed with screaming wind. Not pain, amusement. She fired again as another umbral materialized behind her. Again the bullet passed through empty air. The creatures were learning her timing, shifting between dimensions to avoid her attacks. Most prey would panic at this point. run blindly through the forest until exhaustion made them easy targets, or stand their ground and empty their weapons uselessly at enemies that could not be touched. Jiwoo did neither. She began to walk. Not running, not stopping to fight, just walking steadily through the forest with her rifle ready and her eyes scanning for threats. When an umbral materialized in her path, she adjusted course slightly to walk around it. When one tried to attack from behind, she spun and fired, not expecting to hit but forcing it to phase away. The pack followed her with growing confusion. Their hunting strategy depended on triggering fear or rage in their prey. Fear made victims run in predictable patterns. Rage made them waste energy on useless attacks. But Jiwoo showed neither emotion. She walked for 3 hours. The umbrals kept pace, probing for weaknesses, testing her responses. They tried materializing closer and closer to her position, expecting her to break and run. Instead, she adjusted her path and kept moving. When one umbral finally made a mistake and stayed solid too long while trying to block her way, Jiwoo was ready. Her rifle cracked once. The creature stumbled backward with dark fluid leaking from its shoulder. Not a killing blow, but proof that they could be hurt when they chose to exist fully in this dimension. The wounded umbral made that glass-breaking scream again. This time it sounded different. Not amused, angry, maybe even afraid. The pack began to spread out, trying to surround her. Jiwoo continued walking, but now she changed direction randomly every few minutes. When they tried to predict her path, she would veer left or right for no apparent reason. When they positioned themselves for an ambush, she would backtrack or circle around. This was persistence hunting adapted for alien prey. Not trying to be faster or stronger than the enemy, just being more stubborn, more patient, more willing to keep going when logic said to stop. Hours passed. The umbrals grew more frustrated as their usual tactics failed. They had evolved to counter fear, aggression, and panic. They had no defense against methodical persistence. As the alien sun began to set, painting the forest in shades of red and gold, the umbral pack finally gave up. They faded back into their alternate dimension one by one, until only the wounded scout remained. It stared at Jiwoo for a long moment with those mirror eyes, as if trying to understand what kind of creature she was. Then it too disappeared into dimensional space, leaving her alone in the growing darkness. Jiwoo found a sheltered spot between 2 large tree roots and set up her camp for the night. She ate a small meal from her rations and checked her equipment. The rifle had performed well. Her water supply was adequate. Her body ached from the long walk, but she had felt worse after military training exercises. As she settled down to rest, she heard movement in the darkness around her camp. Not umbrals this time, something else, something that watched and waited and learned. The planet was studying her just as she was studying it, testing her responses, measuring her capabilities, preparing the next challenge in what she was beginning to understand was a very long and very deadly game. But Jiwoo was not worried. Humans had been playing games of survival for millions of years. They had learned patience from tracking wounded deer across endless savannas. They had developed stubborn determination by outlasting predators that should have been able to kill them easily. Whatever Kethevara Prime threw at her next, she would be ready. She would keep walking until either she reached her destination or something finally stopped her. And based on the day's events, stopping her was going to be much harder than the planet expected. Dawn on Kethevara Prime came with a sound like breaking bells. The alien sun cast strange shadows that moved in spirals rather than straight lines. Jiwoo packed her camp efficiently and checked her compass. Still spinning uselessly, she would have to navigate by the sun and her own sense of direction. The forest had changed during the night. Trees that had been straight now curved in impossible arcs. Paths that she remembered as clear were blocked by thorny undergrowth. The planet was reshaping itself around her, testing whether she would panic when familiar landmarks disappeared. She did not panic. Instead, she pulled out her hand-drawn map and marked the changes. If the planet wanted to play games with geography, she would adapt. Humans had navigated by stars and wind patterns long before they invented electronic instruments. 3 days of steady travel brought her to the edge of the Thornweaver territory. The files had described these creatures briefly: carnivorous plants that worked together to create maze-like hunting grounds. The ethereal collective had tried to use their telepathic abilities to communicate with the plant's collective intelligence. Search teams had found their bodies weeks later, drained of all moisture and wrapped in thorny cocoons. Jiwoo stood at the forest edge and studied the maze ahead. Walls of thorny vines rose 20 feet high, forming corridors that twisted and turned like a giant puzzle. The walls pulsed gently as if breathing. Flowers the size of dinner plates opened and closed along the vine surfaces, revealing rows of needle-sharp teeth where petals should be. Every few minutes, the maze would shift. Walls would grow higher or lower. New passages would open while others sealed themselves shut. The entire structure was alive and actively hunting. She could try to go around the maze, but her map showed it stretching for dozens of kilometers in each direction. Going through was the only practical option. Jiwoo entered the first corridor slowly, watching for movement in the walls around her. The thornweavers responded immediately. Vines rustled with anticipation. The tooth flowers turned to track her movement. She could feel the collective intelligence studying her, planning her capture. The first trap came after 50 meters. A section of the path ahead began to narrow, walls closing in to funnel her toward a dead end where larger flowers waited with gaping mouths. The classic thornweaver hunting pattern: force prey into an inescapable corner, then drain them slowly over several days. Instead of rushing forward or turning back, Jiwoo stopped walking. She sat down in the middle of the corridor and pulled out her water bottle. Taking her time, she drank slowly while studying the maze structure around her. The thornweavers had never encountered this response before. Their collective intelligence buzzed with confusion as they tried to understand why their prey was not moving. The wall stopped closing. The flowers turned away from her as if embarrassed by her lack of cooperation. After finishing her water, Jiwoo stood up and walked backward the way she had come. The maze hurriedly opened the path she had just blocked, eager to let her escape rather than deal with her unpredictable behavior. She repeated this pattern throughout the morning. Enter a corridor. Stop when threatened. Rest calmly until the plants grew confused and opened a different path. Sometimes she would walk backward. Sometimes she would sit down and eat a small meal. Always she refused to show fear or urgency. The thornweaver's collective intelligence became increasingly frustrated. They had evolved to counter panic and desperation. Prey was supposed to run blindly into traps or fight uselessly against overwhelming odds. Prey was not supposed to treat their deadly maze like a pleasant garden where they could stop for snacks. By midday, Jiwoo had covered half the distance through the maze. The thornweavers were making mistakes now, opening paths that led directly toward the exit instead of deeper into their hunting ground. Their confusion was making them sloppy. She found the first body in a side passage that the plants had forgotten to close. The skeleton wore hegemony armor, still intact after years in the maze. Claw marks on the metal showed where the warrior had tried to fight his way through the vines. His weapon lay nearby, energy pack drained from futile attempts to burn through walls that regrew faster than they could be destroyed. Jiwoo examined the remains carefully. The hegemony warrior had been powerful, well-armed, and protected by advanced technology. But he had relied on force when force was useless. The harder he fought, the tighter the maze's grip became. She left the skeleton undisturbed and continued through the maze. More bodies appeared as she penetrated deeper. Ethereal collective telepaths who had tried to reason with an intelligence that saw them only as food. Tech union machines that had run out of power while cutting through. Endless regenerating barriers, all of them had tried to use their greatest strengths against an enemy designed to counter those exact advantages. The warriors had fought. The telepaths had tried to communicate. The machines had relied on their technology. None of them had simply been patient. Near the maze's center, Jiwoo discovered something that made her stop and think. A section where the walls were different colors. Newer growth mixed with older vines in a pattern that looked almost like writing. The thornweavers were not just hunting. They were learning, adapting their tactics based on each expedition they encountered. The maze had grown more complex over the centuries. What started as simple plant intelligence had evolved into something approaching artificial intelligence through constant exposure to new threats. Each failed expedition had taught the thornweavers new ways to kill, new weaknesses to exploit. But the plants had never learned to counter simple human stubbornness. They had no experience with prey that refused to cooperate with being hunted. Jiwoo reached the maze's exit as the alien sun reached its zenith. The thornweavers made one last attempt to trap her, growing a wall directly in front of the opening. She sat down again and began cleaning her rifle, acting as if she had all day to wait. The wall withered and retreated within minutes. As she stepped out of the maze, Jiwoo looked back at the frustrated plants. The entire structure was writhing with agitation, walls shifting randomly as the collective intelligence tried to process what had just happened. In 300 years, no one had walked through their territory without triggering their hunting responses. She had done it by treating them not as deadly predators but as an environmental obstacle to be patiently managed. The land beyond the maze stretched out in rolling hills, covered with grass that changed colors as the wind moved through it. In the distance, she could see the bone field mentioned in the expedition files, a vast area where the remains of 47 failed expeditions marked the location of the Alpha's territory. Jiwoo began walking toward the distant field. Her water supply was holding steady. Her rations would last another week if she was careful. Her rifle had not been needed in the maze, which meant she still had full ammunition for whatever waited ahead. Behind her, the Thornweaver maze continued to shift and writhe, trying to understand how its perfect hunting system had been defeated by a single human who simply refused to be hunted. Ahead, the bone field waited under the alien sky. Somewhere in that field of death, the Alpha that had killed legendary warriors from across the galaxy was preparing for expedition number 48. But Jiwoo was no longer worried about meeting the Alpha. The past few days had taught her something important about HFY Prime. The planet's ecosystem was designed to counter specific types of threats: advanced technology, psychic abilities, superior firepower, natural weapons and armor. It was not designed to counter persistence. The human ability to just keep going when logic said to stop was so alien to this world that its predators had no effective response. They could adapt to new weapons or different tactics, but they could not adapt to prey that refused to act like prey. Jiwoo smiled as she walked toward the bone field. Let the Alpha prepare its most deadly attacks. Let it study the failures of previous expeditions and plan the perfect counter to her weapons and tactics. It would not matter. She would face the ultimate predator the same way she had faced everything else on this world, by being more stubborn than it was dangerous, by outlasting perfection through simple human determination. The bone field grew larger as she approached. White fragments scattered across the landscape like fallen stars. Soon she would discover whether human persistence could overcome even the planet's most deadly guardian. But for now, she just kept walking steadily forward, one foot in front of the other, the way her species had been doing for millions of years. The bone field stretched as far as Jiwoo could see. Thousands of skeletal remains covered the ground like a carpet of death. She walked carefully between the scattered bones, reading the stories they told. Hegemony warriors with their distinctive armor plating, ethereal collective telepaths whose skulls showed signs of psychic overload, tech union machines reduced to twisted metal and burned circuits. Each skeleton marked where hope had died and legends had fallen. Some bones showed evidence of desperate final battles. Claw marks on armor, weapons clutched in skeletal hands. Others suggested quick deaths, as if their owners had simply stopped fighting and waited for the end. A few skeletons huddled together in groups, suggesting that some expeditions had tried to work as teams until the very end. All had failed. At the field's center rose a structure that defied easy description. Part organic growth, part deliberate construction, it twisted up from the bone-covered ground like a living cathedral. Its walls pulsed with bioluminescent patterns that seemed to respond to Jiwoo's presence. As she approached, the lights grew brighter and more complex, creating designs that hurt to look at directly. This was the Alpha's lair, the final test that no expedition had ever passed. Jiwoo stopped at the bone field's edge and studied the structure carefully. Every military instinct told her to circle around, look for weaknesses, plan her approach. But she had learned to distrust those instincts on this world. Military tactics were exactly what the Alpha expected. Instead, she sat down among the bones and opened her ration pack. She ate slowly, watching the structure's light patterns shift and change. The Alpha was in there, watching her, studying her responses just as she was studying its domain. Let it watch. Let it try to understand what kind of prey sat calmly eating lunch in a field of death. While she ate, Jiwoo examined the bones around her more carefully. She found evidence of 47 different expeditions spanning 3 centuries. Each group had approached the Alpha's lair with their species' greatest advantages. The hegemony had brought superior firepower. The Ethereals had relied on psychic abilities. The Tech Union had trusted their advanced machines. All had died within sight of their goal, but their deaths had taught Jiwoo something valuable. The Alpha was not just a predator, it was a test. Each expedition had been allowed to penetrate this deep, past all the other dangers to face the planet's ultimate guardian. The Alpha had learned from each encounter, growing stronger and more intelligent. It was the living embodiment of everything that made Kethavara Prime deadly. As the alien sun began to set, Jiwoo finished her meal and stood up. The structure's lights pulsed faster, as if sensing that she was finally ready to approach. She walked steadily toward the organic cathedral, stepping carefully between the bones that marked where heroes had fallen. The Alpha emerged when she was still 50 meters away. It rose from the structure's peak like a nightmare given form. 3 times human height, its body shifted between states of matter as she watched. Sometimes it looked solid as stone. Sometimes she could see through it like smoke. Always it radiated power that made the air itself tremble. The creature had no fixed form. Parts of its body existed in different dimensions simultaneously. Claws that could cut through reality itself. Eyes that reflected not light but the essence of fear itself. It moved without walking, flowed without liquid form, existed without conforming to any physical law Jiwoo understood. This was what had killed legendary warriors. This was the ultimate predator that had ended the dreams of 47 expeditions. The Alpha studied her for a long moment, its impossible eyes cataloging every detail of her appearance and equipment. She could feel its intelligence pressing against her mind, not telepathically like the Ethereals might try, but through some method that bypassed conscious thought entirely. It was reading her responses, learning her patterns, preparing to kill her with maximum efficiency based on the failures of every expedition that had come before. Then it attacked. The Alpha moved faster than thought, crossing the distance between them in less than a heartbeat. Claws that existed in multiple dimensions slashed toward Jiwoo's head. She threw herself sideways, feeling reality tear as the attack passed through the space where she had been standing. Her rifle cracked once. The bullet passed harmlessly through the Alpha's shifting form. The creature had phased into its alternate dimension to avoid the projectile, just as the Umbrals had done days earlier. But Jiwoo was already moving. She did not try to fight the Alpha directly. Instead, she began to run. Not in panic or fear, but with the steady pace of a persistence hunter who planned to outlast rather than overpower her prey. The Alpha followed, flowing through dimensions to match her speed. It attacked again and again, each strike perfectly calculated to exploit the weaknesses shown by previous expeditions. Dimensional claws that could phase through armor, psychic attacks designed to overload telepathic defenses, energy bursts that could destroy the most advanced technology, all wasted on a human who had none of those advantages to begin with. Jiwoo dodged what she could and endured what she could not avoid. The Alpha's claws left burning tracks across her back and arms, but she kept moving. When psychic attacks tried to fill her mind with fear and despair, she focused on the rhythm of her footsteps and pushed the alien thoughts away. Energy bursts that would have destroyed hegemony armor passed harmlessly through her simple clothing. The Alpha grew frustrated as its perfect attacks failed to achieve the expected results. It had killed hegemony warriors by overwhelming their armor. It had destroyed ethereal telepaths by driving them insane. It had defeated Tech Union machines by draining their power sources. But it had never faced prey that simply accepted injury as part of the process and kept moving anyway. Hours passed. The Alpha's attacks became more frequent and more desperate. It tried every killing method it had learned from 3 centuries of successful hunts. Nothing worked. Jiwoo kept running, bleeding but not broken, injured but not defeated. As dawn approached, something unprecedented happened. The Alpha began to slow down. For the first time in its existence, the ultimate predator was growing tired. It had never needed endurance because all previous battles had ended quickly. Its enemies either died fast or fled in panic. None had ever forced it into extended combat. Jiwoo saw the change immediately. The Alpha's movements became less precise. Its dimensional phasing flickered occasionally, leaving it vulnerable for brief moments. Its attacks came slower and with less accuracy. This was the moment she had been waiting for. Not to overpower the Alpha, but to outlast it. To prove that human persistence could defeat even evolutionary perfection given enough time. She changed tactics. No longer just evading, but actively engaging. When the Alpha's phasing flickered, her rifle would crack and bullets would find their mark. When it paused to gather energy for devastating attacks, she would close distance and force it to defend itself. The battle became a test of endurance versus perfection. The Alpha's superior abilities against humanity's greatest strength, the simple refusal to quit when quitting made sense. As the alien sun climbed higher, the Alpha's attacks grew weaker and less frequent. For the first time in its long existence, the ultimate predator was learning what defeat felt like. Jiwoo pressed her advantage, not with superior firepower or advanced tactics, but with the same stubborn determination that had carried her species out of Africa and across the stars. She just kept going when every logical reason said to stop. The end came as dawn painted the bone field in shades of gold and red. The Alpha collapsed to its knees, energy reserves completely depleted by combat it was never designed to sustain. Its impossible form solidified as dimensional phasing became too expensive to maintain. For the first time, Jiwoo could see it clearly. Beneath the terrifying exterior was something beautiful and terrible. The living embodiment of HFY Prime's deadly perfection. But perfection, she had learned, was just another word for having no experience with failure. The Alpha looked at her with eyes that held something like respect. It had tested her with every weapon in its arsenal, and she had endured them all. Not through superior technology or psychic power, but through the simple human ability to keep fighting, when fighting should have been impossible. When it finally fell, the Alpha's last expression was not anger or hatred, but curiosity. As if it finally understood what kind of creature had achieved the impossible. Jiwoo stood over the fallen predator, breathing hard, but victorious. Around her, the bone field seemed different somehow. Quieter, more peaceful. The structure at its center had stopped pulsing, its lights fading to a gentle glow. She had done what 47 expeditions could not. She had faced the Alpha and lived. More than that, she had proven that sometimes the greatest advantage was having no advantages at all except the refusal to surrender. The skull would make an impressive trophy. Proof that Expedition 48 had succeeded where all others failed. But the real victory was the understanding that humanity's place in the galaxy was not based on being stronger or smarter than other species. It was based on being too stubborn to know when they were beaten. The Alpha's massive form lay still in the growing daylight. Jiwoo knelt beside the fallen predator, her hands shaking from exhaustion and adrenaline. Blood from her various wounds had dried into dark stains across her torn clothing. But she was alive. She had faced the ultimate test and survived. Carefully, she examined the Alpha's skull. Even in death, bioluminescent patterns continued to pulse faintly beneath the bone surface. This was her proof. Evidence that she had accomplished what 3 centuries of expeditions could not. The Galactic Council would have to accept that humanity had passed their test, but first she had to survive the journey back to her extraction point. The bone field seemed different now, quieter. The scattered remains of failed expeditions no longer looked like monuments to defeat, but like stepping stones that had led to this moment. Each fallen warrior had taught the Alpha new ways to kill, but they had also revealed its limitations. Without their sacrifices, Jiwoo might never have understood how to defeat perfection. She pulled out her survival knife and began the grim work of removing the Alpha's skull. The bone was unlike anything she had encountered, neither fully organic nor completely artificial. It felt warm to the touch and seemed to resist her efforts, as if some part of the creature's consciousness still lingered within. As she worked, Jiwoo became aware that she was not alone in the bone field. Other predators had gathered at the clearing's edge, drawn by the disturbance but unwilling to approach. She recognized some from the expedition files. Shadow stalkers that moved between dimensions, acid spitters that could dissolve metal armor in seconds, pack hunters with natural camouflage that made them nearly invisible. All of them watched her with what looked like respect. Or maybe fear. None of them tried to attack. The Alpha's skull finally came free with a sound like breaking crystal. As soon as it separated from the body, the remaining bioluminescent patterns flared bright enough to hurt her eyes, then settled into a steady glow that pulsed in time with her heartbeat. Whatever alien technology had powered the creature was still active, still learning, still adapting. Jiwoo wrapped the skull carefully in spare clothing and secured it to her pack. The trophy was heavier than expected, but not impossibly so. She had carried worse loads during military training exercises. The journey back across Kethvara Prime took 3 days. The planet's ecosystem had changed in subtle ways since her victory over the Alpha. The Thornweaver maze allowed her passage without resistance, its collective intelligence apparently convinced that she was no longer suitable prey. The Umbrals watched her from dimensional spaces but made no attempt to attack. Even the atmospheric distortion seemed less severe. Her compass began working properly again on the 2nd day, and her radio crackled with static that might have been distant signals from the orbital station. Word of her victory had somehow spread ahead of her arrival. By the time Jiwoo reached her original crash site, a recovery shuttle was already waiting in the clearing. The pilot, a nervous tech union engineer named Kaithen, could barely believe his eyes when she emerged from the forest carrying the Alpha's glowing skull. Impossible, he kept muttering as they lifted off from the planet's surface. 47 expeditions. 3 centuries. Impossible. Jiwoo said nothing during the flight back to the orbital station. She was too tired for conversation, and besides, she had learned that sometimes the most impressive victories spoke for themselves. The skull's steady glow filled the shuttle cabin, casting strange shadows that seemed to move independently of their sources. The landing bay on Galactic Council Station 3 had never seen anything like Jiwoo's return. Crowds of aliens gathered to witness the impossible sight of a human walking off a shuttle from Kethvara Prime. Not just alive, but carrying proof of victory over the planet's ultimate guardian. Commander. Vexithara's chitinous plates rattled with what might have been amazement as Jiwoo placed the Alpha's skull on the examination table. High Scholar Zanketh's crystalline form flickered through spectrum shifts that indicated extreme agitation. Even Ambassador Kilmora's tree-like composure cracked slightly as she reached out with one branch finger to touch the trophy. The biosignatures match council records. Dr. Lee Hae-jin confirmed after running every test available. This skull definitely came from the Alpha. The energy patterns are consistent with the creature described in previous expedition reports. How? Captain Mordak demanded through his breathing apparatus. How did you accomplish what entire fleets could not? Jiwoo considered the question carefully before answering. The assembled aliens represented civilizations that had ruled the galaxy for millennia. They commanded technologies that could manipulate matter and energy. Their natural abilities surpassed human capabilities in almost every measurable way. But they had all failed where she succeeded. I kept walking, she said simply. When the Umbrals tried to hunt me, I walked until they gave up. When the Thornweavers tried to trap me, I walked until they let me pass. When the Alpha tried to kill me, I kept walking until it collapsed from exhaustion. The aliens exchanged glances that needed no translation. They had expected her to reveal some secret human technology or hidden ability. Instead, she had given them the same answer she provided before departing for the planet. Humans just kept going. The Alpha had never faced extended combat, Jiwoo continued. It was designed for quick kills against opponents who relied on superior advantages. When those advantages were taken away or proven useless, previous expeditions had nothing left to fall back on. And humans do? Commander Vexthara asked. Humans have persistence. We evolved to chase prey across continents until it collapsed from exhaustion. We survived ice ages by refusing to give up when survival seemed impossible. We reached the stars by trying again every time our rockets exploded. She gestured at the Alpha's skull, still pulsing with alien light. The Alpha was perfect at what it did. But perfection means never learning to handle failure. It had no experience with prey that could absorb punishment and keep fighting anyway. High Scholar Zanketh's crystalline body flickered through rapid color changes. You defeated evolutionary perfection through stubbornness. Persistence, Jiwoo corrected. There's a difference. Stubbornness is refusing to change when change makes sense. Persistence is continuing to pursue your goal while adapting your methods as needed. The formal verification process took hours, but the results were never in doubt. Jiwoo had accomplished what the Galactic Council had deemed impossible. She had survived Kethvara Prime's ultimate test and returned with proof of her victory. As the council members began the bureaucratic process of approving humanity's membership application, Jiwoo found herself standing alone with Captain Park Dong-min in the station's observation lounge. "How do you feel?" he asked. Jiwoo looked out at the stars scattered across space like scattered diamonds. Somewhere among them was Earth, a small blue world populated by a species that most galactic civilizations considered primitive. Soon those same civilizations would have to accept humans as equals, partners in a community of species that spanned the galaxy. "Tired," she admitted, "and hungry. I've been eating field rations for 2 weeks." Park laughed, the sound startling several passing aliens who were not accustomed to human expressions of humor. "I meant about proving humanity worthy of council membership." Jiwoo touched the scar on her cheek where one of the Alpha's claws had found its mark. The wound would heal, but the mark would remain forever, a reminder of the day humanity proved it belonged among the stars. "We didn't prove we're worthy," she said quietly. "We proved we're different. The Council expects new species to demonstrate superior technology or natural abilities. We showed them something they'd never seen before, which was the willingness to fail and keep trying anyway." Jiwoo watched a transport ship dock at the station's far end. Every other species that took the test had advantages they could rely on. When those advantages weren't enough, they had nothing left. And humans? Humans expect to fail the first time. And the second time. Sometimes the 100th time. She smiled slightly. "We're the species that took 10,000 years to figure out agriculture and still managed to reach other star systems. We fail better than anyone else in the galaxy." Captain Park nodded slowly. He understood what she meant. Human history was full of disasters that had been turned into victories through sheer persistence. Failed expeditions that led to successful ones. Lost battles that taught lessons for winning wars. Every human failure contained the seeds of eventual success. "The Council is going to have trouble understanding us," he observed. "Good," Jiwoo replied. "Let them wonder what other impossible things humans might accomplish. Let them remember that the species they once considered primitive just walked off the deadliest planet in known space, carrying the skull of something that killed their greatest heroes." Through the viewport, Kethavara Prime turned slowly in space, green and brown and beautiful from orbit. Jiwoo wondered if future expeditions would find it changed by her victory. Would the ecosystem adapt to counter human persistence the way it had adapted to counter other threats? Or would her success force the planet to evolve entirely new defenses? It didn't matter. Other humans would face those challenges when the time came. They would fail and... The formal ceremony took place in the Council's Great Assembly, a vast chamber that could hold representatives from every member species simultaneously. Jiwoo had never seen so many different forms of life in one place. Beings of crystalline energy shared space with creatures that looked like walking mountains. Aquatic species floated in mobile water tanks, while gaseous entities swirled within containment fields. All of them had come to witness humanity's admission to the galactic. Council Jiwoo stood at the chamber's center, still wearing her torn and blood-stained clothing from Kethavara Prime. The Council had offered her formal ceremonial dress, but she preferred to appear exactly as she was, a human who had walked through hell and emerged victorious. The Alpha's skull rested on a platform beside her, its bioluminescent patterns casting strange shadows across the assembled delegates. Even from a distance, the alien representatives seemed reluctant to look directly at the trophy. They had all heard the stories of expeditions that never returned from the death world. Now they had to accept that a supposedly primitive species had succeeded, where their greatest heroes had failed. Ambassador Kilmora stepped forward to begin the ceremony. Her tree-like form towered over Jiwoo, but something in the alien's posture suggested respect rather than dominance. "Lieutenant Kang Jiwoo of the human species," she announced in her voice like wind through leaves. "You have completed the trial of worthiness as prescribed by council law. Do you claim victory over the Alpha of Kethavara Prime?" "I do," Jiwoo replied simply. "Do you present proof of this victory for examination by the council?" Jiwoo gestured to the glowing skull. "I do." High Scholar Zanketh approached the platform with instruments that hummed and clicked as they analyzed the trophy. His crystalline body flickered through rapid color changes as the readings confirmed what everyone already knew. "Biosignatures verified," he announced to the assembly. "This specimen matches council records for the Alpha entity. The energy patterns are consistent with a recently deceased Alpha-class predator." A ripple of sound passed through the chamber, Clicking, buzzing, harmonious tones and sounds that had no human equivalent. The assembled species were expressing amazement in their various ways. After 3 centuries of failed expeditions, the impossible had finally happened. Commander Vexithara stepped forward next. By what means did you achieve victory over the Alpha? The question was part of the formal ceremony, but Jiwoo could hear genuine curiosity in the translated voice. This was the moment that would define humanity's place in galactic civilization. Not just the fact of their victory, but the method they had used to achieve it. How she answered would shape the galaxy's understanding of what humans were capable of. I outlasted it, Jiwoo said clearly, her voice carrying to every corner of the vast chamber. The Alpha was designed to counter superior technology, natural weapons, psychic abilities, and overwhelming force. It had no defense against simple persistence. Explain. High Scholar Zanketh requested. Jiwoo looked around the chamber at hundreds of alien faces representing civilizations that had ruled the stars for millennia. Each species had developed incredible advantages through evolution or technology. Each had tried to use those advantages to pass the Council's test. All had failed. My species evolved as persistence hunters, she began. We survived not by being stronger or faster than our prey, but by refusing to give up the chase. We would track animals for days or weeks until they collapsed from exhaustion. When predators tried to hunt us, we outlasted them too. She gestured at the Alpha's skull. The Alpha had never encountered prey that treated injury as temporary and exhaustion as manageable. It was perfect at what it did, but perfection means never learning to handle failure. When I refused to die according to its expectations, it had no backup strategy. Captain Mordak's breathing apparatus hissed with what might have been skepticism. You defeated the ultimate predator through endurance? Through persistence, Jiwoo corrected. There's a difference. Endurance is about lasting. Persistence is about continuing to pursue your goal while adapting your methods as needed. When the Alpha's attacks failed to stop me, I didn't just survive them. I learned from them. I adapted. I kept walking toward my objective no matter what tried to stop me. The chamber fell silent as the alien representatives processed this information. They had expected humans to reveal some hidden technology or secret ability. Instead, they had been told that victory came from simply refusing to quit. Ambassador Kilmora raised one branch-like arm. The Council finds the human claim of victory to be valid and substantiated. By the ancient laws that govern our civilization, the human species has proven their worthiness for membership in the Galactic Council. The formal words that followed were largely ceremonial. Treaties signed, protocols established, trade agreements initiated, but Jiwoo barely heard them. She was thinking about what this moment meant for humanity's future. Access to technologies that could transform Earth overnight. Knowledge accumulated by species that had been spacefaring when humans were still discovering fire. Trade routes connecting thousands of worlds across the galaxy. But more importantly, acceptance as equals by civilizations that had initially viewed humans as primitive and backward. Proof that advancement could not be measured solely by technology or natural abilities. After the ceremony, Jiwoo found herself surrounded by alien dignitaries eager to understand how humans had accomplished the impossible. She answered their questions patiently, explaining persistence hunting and human evolutionary history to beings who had evolved under completely different pressures. Dr. Lee Hae-jin approached with a concerned expression. The xenobiology teams want to study the Alpha's skull more extensively. They're offering to share their findings with Earth's scientific community. Let them study it, Jiwoo replied. But make sure they understand that the real lesson isn't in the skull itself. It's in how it was obtained, which is, sometimes the greatest advantage is having no advantages at all except the refusal to surrender. As the evening progressed, Jiwoo realized that her victory had implications beyond simple council membership. Throughout the chamber, she overheard conversations between alien representatives discussing human capabilities in new terms. Species that had dismissed humanity as irrelevant were now reassessing their positions. The galaxy had just learned that the supposedly primitive species from a small blue world possessed something that even the most advanced civilizations could not replicate. The ability to succeed through sheer stubborn determination when logic said success was impossible. Commander Vexithara approached as the formal events were winding down. I must ask, she said, What will your species do now that you have access to galactic civilization? Jiwoo looked out through the chamber's massive viewports at the stars scattered across space. Among them was Earth, a world that would soon join a community spanning thousands of systems. Her people would gain access to wonders they had only dreamed of. They would also gain access to challenges they could not yet imagine. We'll explore, she said. We'll learn. We'll probably make mistakes that horrify you and attempt things that seem impossible, but we'll keep trying until we figure it out. And if you encounter obstacles that appear insurmountable, Jiwoo smiled, touching the scar on her face where the Alpha's claw had marked her. The wound would heal completely, but she planned to keep the scar. A reminder of the day humanity proved it belonged among the stars. Then we'll do what we always do, she said. We'll keep walking until the impossible becomes possible. That's what humans do best. 3 weeks later, Jiwoo stood on the bridge of the first human starship to carry Council authorization for unrestricted galactic travel. Through the viewport, she could see Earth growing larger as they approached home. The planet looked exactly the same as when she had left, but everything was different now. Humanity was no longer alone in the universe. They had allies among the stars, access to technologies that would revolutionize their civilization, and recognition as equals from species they had once thought mythical. Captain Park joined her at the viewport. How do you think Earth will react to the news? Jiwoo considered the question. Humans had always been dreamers, imagining what might exist beyond their small world. Now they knew. The galaxy was vast and full of wonders, populated by beings of incredible diversity and capability. It was also full of challenges that would test every aspect of human determination and adaptability. They'll be excited, she said, then terrified, then excited again. Eventually, they'll start planning expeditions to places that will probably try to kill them. And you think that's a good thing? Jiwoo looked at the Alpha's skull, now secured in the ship's cargo bay, but still pulsing with alien light. Trophy and reminder both, proof that humans could succeed where others failed, but only through methods that seemed impossible to more advanced species. It's a human thing, she replied. We see challenges that look impossible and assume we just haven't figured out the right approach yet. The galaxy is about to learn what happens when you give persistence hunters access to infinite hunting grounds. As Earth filled their view, Jiwoo thought about the future spreading out before her species. Humans would venture to worlds that defied imagination. They would encounter. 6 months after humanity joined the Galactic Council, the universe was learning what it meant to have persistence hunters among the stars. Jiwoo stood in the observation deck of Luna Station, watching construction crews put the finishing touches on humanity's first interstellar shipyard. The facility sprawled across the moon's surface like a metal city, powered by fusion reactors that the Tech Union had provided as part of the membership benefits. Captain Park approached with a data pad that glowed with urgent messages. We have a problem, he said quietly. 3 problems, actually. Jiwoo turned away from the viewport. In the months since her return from Kethvara Prime, she had been promoted to Special Advisor for Interstellar Affairs. The job mostly involved explaining human behavior to confused alien diplomats and helping plan humanity's expansion into galactic civilization. What kind of problems? The first one is political, Park said, handing her the pad. The Hegemony Council is questioning humanity's membership. They're claiming that surviving Kethvara Prime was luck rather than skill. Jiwoo scrolled through the diplomatic messages. The Hegemony had lost their best warriors to the Alpha 3 centuries ago. Their pride was still wounded by watching a supposedly primitive species succeed where they had failed. Let me guess, she said. They want another test. They want you to face the crimson maze of Veltar. It's supposed to be even deadlier than Kethvara Prime. The second message made Jiwoo raise an eyebrow. It was from Dr. Lee Hae-jin, now leading humanity's Xenobiology Research Division. The Ethereal Collective wants to study human persistence hunting techniques. They think it might help them survive in hostile environments where their telepathy fails. And the third problem? Park's expression grew more serious. 3 human exploration teams have gone missing in the past month, all in different sectors, all investigating worlds that the Council marked as dangerous but not impossible. Jiwoo felt a familiar chill run down her spine. She had feared this would happen. Humans had heard about her victory on Kethvara Prime and assumed they could handle any challenge the galaxy offered. They were about to learn that persistence alone was not always enough. Where were they going? Team Alpha was investigating crystal caves on Zephyria. The caves are supposed to sing songs that drive visitors insane. Team Beta went to the storm world of Castellan to study atmospheric phenomena. Team Gamma disappeared near the gravity wells of Mordeth Prime. All dangerous worlds, all supposedly manageable for species with the right preparation and equipment. But Jiwoo knew that humans had a tendency to underestimate risks when they were excited about new challenges. Any distress signals? None. Complete radio silence from all three teams. Jiwoo handed the pad back to Park and looked out at the shipyard again. Human engineers worked alongside alien technicians to build vessels that would carry her species to distant stars. Everyone was excited about the possibilities that Council membership offered. They had forgotten that the galaxy was full of things that could kill even persistence hunters. "I need to speak with the Council," she said. "Set up a meeting with Ambassador Kilmora and send messages to all human exploration teams. New safety protocols effective immediately." What kind of protocols? The kind that remind them that being stubborn doesn't make you immortal. The meeting with Ambassador Kilmora took place in the Council's diplomatic center on Luna Station. The tree-like alien listened carefully as Jiwoo explained the situation with the missing exploration teams. "This was expected," Kilmora said when Jiwoo finished. "New species often overestimate their abilities after passing the trial. The galaxy has ways of teaching humility to those who need the lesson." "These are good people," Jiwoo replied. "Scientists and explorers who want to contribute to galactic knowledge. They don't deserve to die because they were too confident. Death is the price of overconfidence in space," the ambassador said simply. "Every species learns this lesson eventually." Jiwoo leaned forward in her chair. "What if we could learn it without losing lives? What if humans could develop better judgment about when persistence is helpful and when it's suicidal? How do you propose to do that?" "By facing the challenges ourselves first." "You said the hegemony wants another test? Fine. But instead of the Crimson Maze, I want to visit the three worlds where our teams disappeared. If I can survive them and bring back information about what went wrong, maybe we can prevent future losses." Ambassador Kilmora's branches rustled with what might have been surprise. "You wish to face 3 death worlds instead of 1? I wish to understand why persistence hunting failed in those environments. Every human failure teaches us something useful, but only if we survive long enough to learn the lesson." The alien was quiet for several minutes, her form swaying slightly as she considered the proposal. Finally, she spoke. "The Council will need to vote on this request. It is unprecedented for a species to voluntarily face multiple trials." "Then let them vote," Jiwoo said. "But while they're debating, I want to start preparing. Send me everything the Council has on those 3 worlds. Environmental data, expedition reports, whatever information exists." 3 days later, the Council approved Jiwoo's proposal by a narrow margin. Many species thought humans were being recklessly ambitious. Others were curious to see how far human persistence could be pushed before it reached its limits. Dr. Lee Hae-jin was not happy about the decision. "You barely survived Kethavara Prime," she pointed out during the mission briefing. "Now you want to face 3 equally dangerous worlds back-to-back?" "Not back-to-back," Jiwoo corrected. "One at a time with full analysis between each mission. This isn't about proving human superiority. It's about understanding human limitations." The first world on her list was Zephyria, where Team Alpha had disappeared while studying crystal caves. The planet's surface was covered in crystalline formations that resonated with sonic frequencies. Local wildlife had evolved to use sound as a weapon, creating harmonies that could shatter bone or frequencies that disrupted brain function. Jiwoo spent 2 weeks studying everything the Council knew about sonic-based life forms. She learned about frequency-dampening techniques, protective equipment, and the warning signs of dangerous resonance patterns. Most importantly, she learned that some challenges required more than persistence to overcome. They required the wisdom to know when to retreat. The journey to Zephyria took her through 3-star systems humanity had never visited before. Each jump point revealed new wonders. Gas giants with rings made of pure crystal. Star systems where multiple species had built orbital habitats around the same sun. Ancient structures that predated most galactic civilizations. But Jiwoo barely noticed the sights. She was focused on the mission ahead, and the knowledge that 3 human lives might depend on what she learned from their mistakes. The ship's pilot was Sergeant Kim Tae-ho, the same demolitions expert who had been part of her original support team for the Kethvara Prime mission. He had volunteered for this assignment despite knowing the risks. "Why do you think the teams went silent?" he asked as they approached Zephyria's system. Jiwoo studied the planet's image on the navigation display. It looked beautiful from space, covered in formations that sparkled like jewels, but she had learned not to trust appearances when it came to deadly worlds. "Because they forgot the most important rule of persistence hunting," she said, "which is, sometimes the best way to catch your prey is to let it think it's safe, then attack when it's not expecting you. But sometimes the best way to survive is to recognize when you're not the hunter." Zephyria grew larger in their viewport, its crystalline surface reflecting their ship's lights in brilliant rainbow patterns. Somewhere on that world, 3 humans had made a mistake that cost them their lives. Jiwoo's job was to find out what that mistake was and make sure no other human exploration team repeated it. The galaxy had taught humanity that persistence could overcome incredible obstacles. Now it was about to teach them that even the most stubborn species needed to know when to adapt their tactics. As they entered Zephyria's atmosphere, Jiwoo prepared herself for another lesson in survival. The kind of lesson that humans seem to need to learn over and over again, until they finally understood that confidence without wisdom was just another word for suicide. The crystal caves waited below, beautiful and deadly, holding secrets that might save human lives or claim another one. Either way, Jiwoo would keep walking toward the truth until she found it or it killed her trying.